Hi, my name's Leanne. I'm the Director of Inclusive Education Planning, and we provide professional learning for educators, for teachers, for assistants, for parents on the inclusion of students with disabilities. So I'm going to talk to you today about the inclusion of students with disabilities and a strategy that you can use to achieve that. So I'm going to define the terms inclusion, and I'm going to define the strategy cooperative learning. I'm going to talk about the research on these strategies. I'm going to talk about why it's important to use these two in conjunction with each other. And I'm going to end with 3 simple strategies that you can use tomorrow in your classroom. So inclusion. What is inclusion? If you asked 100 teachers, assistants, parents what inclusion is, you would receive 100 different answers. The definition of inclusion that I draw on, and that a lot of disability scholars and inclusive educators draw on, is that is used within the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And particularly General Comment 4 clarifies what inclusive education is. Inclusive education is the education of students with disabilities within general education. So students with disabilities have the opportunity to be educated alongside their peers. The other thing I'm talking about today is cooperative learning. Cooperative learning is a type of group work, but it's not the sort of group work that we often think of as teachers. Often when we think of group work, we think of just asking children to get into a group and to work together. Cooperative learning is not like that. Cooperative learning, it's a highly structured form of group work where children work in heterogeneous groups, so mixed ability groups. We often think of group work as ability grouping, and sometimes ability grouping is quite appropriate. But there are times when we can use mixed ability groups and achieve strong academic and social outcomes because students are mixing with students that they wouldn't normally socialise with. So therefore, cooperative learning is a powerful strategy for the inclusion of students with disabilities. So that's the definition. I'm going to move on to the research on cooperative learning. So there's a lot of research on cooperative learning, and the research started in the 80s with Slavin and Johnson & Johnson. So when you're looking up the research, they will often pop up as the early pioneers of cooperative learning. There's also this wonderful book by Kagan. He provides a lot of learning, professional learning on cooperative learning that is just excellent. It is targeted at teachers within general education, but this is not only a combination of theory, but has a whole lot of practical resources in there as well. And this is a book that I highly recommend, and it's super valuable for teachers. Another book that I highly recommend, Designing Group Work. This is used a lot by maths teachers actually on ways of having heterogeneous grouping for maths. So this is written by Darling, Hammond and Goodlad. Lots of strategies in there, a bit more theoretical than Kagan's book. Another lot of research, Hattie's work. Of course, we know that Hattie is highly respected. He talks about cooperative learning as being a powerful intervention, and he documents the effect size of cooperative learning. In with the effect size, anything above 0.4, 0.4 is the hinge point. So what Hattie tells us is that whatever we do in the classroom, any intervention works. He tells us that we need to work out what works best. And so his effect sizes, anything above 0.4, means that it is more effective. So cooperative learning, in terms of its effect size when compared with individual learning, and individual learning is often the way that we approach the learning of students with disabilities. They often tend to, when they're in segregated settings, they tend to work on individual programs on their own and do not socialise with others. But cooperative learning can be used as a powerful technique for their inclusion. And cooperative learning versus individual learning has an effect size of 0.59. So it works. There's another type, a particular type of cooperative learning called Jigsaw. And it has a very high effect size, 1.2. So it's a very powerful intervention. I'm not actually going to be talking about Jigsaw today in this short video, because Jigsaw is something that you need to work towards. I'm going to be talking about 3 simple strategies that you could utilise in the near future once you prepare for them in your classroom that are quite simple to do. So they're the introductory methods. But Jigsaw is something to work towards if you've done other forms of group work and you would like to introduce cooperative learning in your class. So we've talked about the definitions of cooperative learning. We've talked about the research. I'm going to give you some strategies for cooperative learning, and I'm going to talk about 3 particular strategies. I'm going to talk about think, pair, share, numbered heads together, and 4 corners. So they are 3 strategies that are very simple to use, and you probably have used them already in your classroom, but you may not have thought of them in light of being an inclusive strategy for students with disabilities. Think, pair, share. So think, pair, share is where you pose a problem, and then each student thinks individually about it for a couple of minutes. Then they are paired with a partner. They talk about the problem, and then they share it with the rest of the class or with another couple. So they're working together to solve a problem. So they have to find some solution to this problem that they both agree on. Think, pair, share can be made to be an inclusive strategy if students are taught the foundation skills before they do think, pair, share. And think, pair, share is probably one of the easiest strategies to use. And I think that's why it's used so much. You've probably done it when you've gone to professional learning as a teacher. It's used a great deal, and it's used a lot in classrooms. It can be made more inclusive by teaching the foundation skills that students need. You can incorporate visuals in there. Visuals work well for students with disabilities, but it also works well for students who don't have disabilities. And it also reduces the cognitive load of the teacher. There's some research on that reducing cognitive load is important for everyone, for the students and for the teacher. You can make some visuals, some simple visuals, such as one student can be student A, another student can be student B. They could wear an A and a B as a sticker, a tag around their neck. So, and then you can structure it by saying A will go first speaking for 1 minute or 2 minutes. You could have a timer so the students know when they finish, and when it's student B's turn, They can also be timed. And that's another form of a visual. Your timer could be on your board so that students know how long they have to work. So think, pair, share can be used as an inclusive strategy. The beauty of think, pair, share is that often when we're doing whole class teaching, we might pose a problem to the class and ask for a response. And a handful of students will put up their hand, and I can guarantee you the students that are putting up their hand are the ones who already know the answer. So it's not telling us a lot about what the students know. In think, pair, share, everybody is engaged in the lesson. Everybody is participating, and it's an inclusive strategy. The next one that I'm going to talk about is numbered heads together. Numbered heads together is similar, where students need to work together, as in all forms of cooperative learning. There's that interdependence where students need to work together, they need to communicate with each other, they have interdependence, they need to work together to solve a problem. In numbered heads together, you can have, I recommend a maximum of 4 students and give them a number each, and they could wear that as their visual. So number 1, 2, 3, 4. If you have students who cannot recognise the symbol of 1, 2, 3, 4, you could have a picture so that they don't need to recognise the symbol. And that's a nice way of being inclusive. With numbered heads together, what you can do is you pose a problem. You put students into mixed ability groups. I recommend that you don't allow students to choose their own grouping, that you carefully think about who works together and to make it a mixed ability group. And students have to work together to solve a problem. And you can make it highly structured, and each student can have roles. You can designate an amount of time for each student to talk, but at the end of a period of time, you want them to reach a consensus and to report back to either another group or to the whole class about what their consensus is regarding their response to the problem. Another type of cooperative learning that I'd like to talk about today is 4 corners. So 4 corners is where you have 4 statements. You have the statement strongly agree, agree, disagree, and strongly disagree. And you put those 4 statements in the 4 corners of the room. And you pose a statement, and it might be something fun and simple to begin with, and I recommend that's a good way of starting cooperative learning. Don't make it too heavy to start with. I actually recommend making it social at the beginning. So you might have a statement like, I love chocolate. And in fact, what is interesting is in every class I've taught, there's always a student who doesn't like chocolate. I love chocolate, but in every class I've taught, there is a student who doesn't like chocolate, which I find confusing and bewildering, but we're all different. So I'm sure there might be students in your strongly disagree group, because I found that there always is. So you pose this statement, or it might be a question, and students go to their corner of the room that resonates with them, that is their response, and they talk with the partners there about what their response to that statement is, and they come to some resolution, some consensus about where they stand, and then they share with the rest of the group. So the strongly agree group you might structure it that they need to talk about which type of chocolate they prefer. Is it, do they all enjoy Cadbury chocolate? The strongly disagree group might have to talk about why they dislike chocolate, their experience of chocolate. and come to some sort of consensus, some presentation that they give another group or the rest of the class. So that is the end of my presentation. So I have talked about inclusion and cooperative learning. I have defined inclusion and cooperative learning and talked about how cooperative learning is a content-free strategy that can be used in your classroom for the inclusion of students with disabilities. I've talked about the research behind it. It's an evidence-based approach. A lot of the research is within general education, but Putnam has written a book to justify the use of cooperative learning as an inclusive strategy. And I've talked about 3 simple ways that you can use cooperative learning in your class, and it can be used right through from the beginning of formal schooling, from when the time children are 5, right through to university, so certainly through to year 12, and it can be used in any subject area. So these are content-free ways of delivering not just academic content, but at the same time teaching social skills. And social skills are important, and it's an important way of showing that you value students with disabilities. So thank you very much for listening to this presentation. Bye for now.